Have you ever noticed something strange? The moment you can't find your phone, you start feeling nervous. Maybe it's under the pillow, maybe it's in your pocket, or maybe you left it somewhere for a few minutes. It feels like your entire life has stopped. But here's a question almost nobody asks. How did people live before phones even existed? Not just for a few hours, not for a weekend. I'm talking about thousands of years of human history. How did they tell their families they were safe? How did they find someone in a city without Google Maps? How did businesses work? How did people fall in love? How did news spread across an entire country when there wasn't a single phone on Earth? The strange part is, they didn't just survive. They built civilizations, they crossed oceans, they created empires, and somehow they managed to stay connected without carrying a screen in their pocket. So, what did the world actually look like before phones? And if they could live perfectly without one, why does losing ours for just 10 minutes feel like a disaster? Let's go back to a time when the only notification that mattered was someone knocking on your door. Imagine it's the year 1850. You wake up early in the morning. There's no alarm on your bedside table. Instead, the first thing you hear is the sound of birds, church bells, or maybe a rooster outside your window. You get dressed, step outside, and before you've even had breakfast, your day has already begun. There are no messages waiting for you, no missed calls, no emails, no endless scrolling. In fact, for the first few hours of the day, you might not receive a single piece of new information. And strangely enough, that was completely normal. Today, if someone doesn't reply within 5 minutes, we start wondering what happened. But back then, waiting wasn't a problem. It was simply a part of life. If you wanted to talk to someone, you couldn't just press a button. You had to go and meet them. Sometimes that meant walking across your village, sometimes riding a horse for hours, and sometimes traveling for days just to have one important conversation. Think about that for a second. Today, a message travels around the world in less than a second. 200 years ago, the person carrying your message had to physically travel every single kilometer. Every letter, every invitation, every important piece of news moved only as fast as a human, a horse, or a ship could carry it. That's why people planned everything differently. If you wanted to meet a friend next Friday, you couldn't text them at the last minute. The place, the time, everything had to be decided in advance. And if one person was late, there was no way to tell the other. You simply waited, sometimes for hours. Believe it or not, people became incredibly good at keeping promises, because once they gave someone their word, there was no easy way to change it. In many ways, their memory became their smartphone. They remembered addresses, they remembered birthdays, they remembered directions, and perhaps most importantly, they remembered people. But this creates an even bigger mystery. If there were no phones, how did important news travel across entire countries? How could a father working hundreds of kilometers away let his family know he was alive? And how did kings, governments, and businesses communicate with thousands of people long before the first telephone was ever invented? The answer is far more fascinating than you might imagine. So, if there were no phones, how did people tell someone they were safe? The answer begins with something so ordinary that today, almost nobody thinks about it. A letter. For thousands of years, a handwritten letter wasn't just a piece of paper. It was someone's voice, someone's emotions, sometimes even someone's last goodbye. Imagine this. A young man leaves his village to work hundreds of kilometers away. His family has no idea if he arrived safely. Days pass, then weeks. Finally, a postman walks into the village carrying a small envelope. Everyone stops what they're doing because that tiny piece of paper could change someone's entire life. It could bring good news, a wedding invitation, the birth of a child, or heartbreaking news that a loved one would never return. That's why people treasured letters. Many families kept them for decades. Some are still preserved in museums today. But letters had one big problem. They were slow, very slow. A journey that takes a few hours by car today could take weeks for a letter. And crossing an ocean? Sometimes several months. So how did governments communicate during emergencies? How did armies send orders during wars? How did kings control enormous kingdoms? They built one of the greatest communication networks in history, professional messengers. These weren't ordinary people. Their only job was to carry information as fast as humanly possible. In the ancient Persian Empire, fresh horses waited at stations along major roads. A messenger would ride at full speed, reach the next station, jump onto another horse, and continue without stopping. This relay system allowed messages to travel astonishing distances for its time. Centuries later, the Roman Empire created an even larger road network. Those famous Roman roads weren't built only for soldiers. they also carried information, letters, government orders, tax records. Everything moved along those roads. In many ways, those roads became the internet of the ancient world. But here's something even more surprising. Sometimes, the fastest messenger wasn't a human at all. It was a bird. For centuries, people trained carrier pigeons to return home from incredible distances. A tiny message was rolled into a small tube, attached to the bird's leg, and released into the sky. Hours later, the pigeon arrived home carrying information that could save lives, win battles, or help businesses make fortunes. Imagine trusting a bird with information worth millions. Yet it worked again and again. By the 1800s, the world changed forever, not because of the telephone, but because of another invention, the telegraph. For the first time in history, a message could travel through wires, faster than any horse, any ship, or any bird. People were amazed. What once took weeks could now take minutes. It must have felt almost like magic. And without realizing it, humanity had taken its very first step toward the connected world we live in today. But communication was only one challenge. There was another question every person faced almost every single day. What happened when you needed to find a place in a world where Google Maps didn't exist? Today, almost nobody memorizes directions anymore. Need to visit a new place? You simply open Google Maps, put in the address, and a calm voice tells you exactly where to turn. It feels so normal that we rarely stop to think about it. But for thousands of years, every journey depended on one thing: your memory. Imagine you're traveling to another town in the year 1880. There's no blue dot showing your location, no GPS, no satellite watching from space. If you take the wrong road, nothing on Earth will tell you. So how did people avoid getting lost? First, they learned landmarks: a giant oak tree, a stone bridge, a church tower, a river, a mountain. People didn't remember street names. They remembered the world itself. Directions sounded completely different back then. Instead of turn left after 300 meters, people would say, walk until you reach the old well, cross the wooden bridge. When you see the windmill, take the dirt road on the right. The landscape became the map. And because people paid attention, they often knew their surroundings far better than we do today. But what if you were traveling somewhere you'd never been before? You asked people, strangers, shopkeepers, farmers, blacksmiths, travelers on the road. In fact, asking for directions was such a normal part of life that conversations between complete strangers happened every single day. Many lifelong friendships, and even love stories, began with a simple question. Excuse me, could you tell me the way? Of course. Not everyone gave perfect directions. Sometimes people misunderstood. Sometimes the roads had changed. And sometimes you simply got lost. But getting lost wasn't always considered a disaster. It was often part of the adventure. People expected delays. They expected mistakes. They expected the journey to take longer than planned. Today, we're frustrated if Google Maps adds 5 extra minutes. Back then, an extra day wasn't unusual. Even sailors crossing oceans had no GPS. Instead, they looked at the stars, the position of the sun, ocean currents, wind patterns, and simple navigation tools like the compass. These skills allowed explorers to cross entire oceans, long before satellites ever existed. Think about how incredible that really is. Humans reached new continents, mapped the world, and built global trade routes without a single digital screen. But perhaps the biggest difference wasn't technology, it was attention. People observed more, they remembered more, they talked to more people, and they became deeply connected to the places around them. Ironically, the less technology they had, the more they noticed the world itself. But phones didn't just change the way we travel. They completely transformed something even more personal: our relationships. How did people fall in love, stay connected with family, and maintain friendships when sending a single message could take weeks? The answer might surprise you. So, how did people fall in love when there were no phones, no texting, no video calls, no dating apps? The answer is surprisingly simple. They spent time together. People met at local markets, festivals, churches, schools, family gatherings, or through mutual friends. There were no profiles to scroll through, no last seen, no typing indicator. If someone wanted to know you, they had to show up. And when two people lived far apart, they wrote letters. Some letters took weeks to arrive. Others took months. That meant every word mattered. People didn't send 10 messages a day. They poured their hearts into a single letter. Many of those letters still exist today, filled with emotions that have survived for hundreds of years. Family relationships were different too. If a son left home for work, his parents might not hear from him for weeks, sometimes even months. Not because he didn't care, but because that's simply how the world worked. Patience wasn't a choice, it was a way of life. Business was different too. People couldn't make instant calls. Everything had to be planned carefully. Mistakes were costly. Then, everything changed. In 1876, the telephone was invented. For the first time, human voices could travel across wires. Years later came mobile phones, then smartphones, and finally, the internet put the world into our pockets. Today, we can call anyone, learn almost anything, travel anywhere, and send the money, all from one small device. It's one of humanity's greatest inventions, but every invention changes us. Phones connected the world, yet many people spend more time looking at screens than at each other. We can send hundreds of messages and still feel lonely. The truth is, the world before phones wasn't better, and today's world isn't worse. They're simply different. People then had fewer tools, but often more patience. We have amazing technology, but sometimes less attention. Maybe the lesson isn't to throw our phones away. It's to remember that real human connection still matters. For thousands of years, people built civilizations, raised families, and changed history. Without making a single phone call, perhaps, the greatest connection will always be the person standing right in front of you. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this documentary, please like the video, subscribe for more fascinating stories, and I'll see you in the next one.